Hello, and welcome to Doctor Who, The Cancelled Chronicles. Like many before us, we will be taking a look at an alternate history where Doctor Who wasn't cancelled in 1989. Today, we will be taking a look at Season 27, which would be Sylvester McCoy's final season, as well as the first two seasons of the 8th Doctor, who will be announced soon. I am your temporary narrator, the Geek Informant. However, hopefully, we will get our normal narrator, who unfortunately was too busy to do our first video, for the next one. With that, moving on. Jonathan Powell was now the controller of BBC One and was eager to set Doctor Who up for cancellation, but John Nathan Turner pleaded and begged with him not to do so. He would even offer him his resignation as producer to sustain Doctor Who for a little while longer. Powell ultimately relented, giving Doctor Who one more season, and if ratings didn't improve, he would cancel the series. So, Season 27 became the last season for John Nathan Turner, in addition to Andrew Cartmel, who wasn't interested in doing more than 4 seasons. McCoy also wanted to end his reign as the Doctor, so if the show did end, it would end ambiguously with a regeneration, which J&T agreed with. Originally, Ace was to leave in the middle of the season for a new companion, but ultimately she decided to stay as she felt she owed it to McCoy to stay for his regeneration, so Cartmel restructured the season to have her for the entire season. There was also a new TARDIS interior, so if there was to be another Doctor after McCoy, their new TARDIS would be set up and ready to go. With this, Season 27 of Doctor Who begins. The first story is Thin Ice, written by Mark Platt. Moscow, 1967. The Doctor and Ace have arrived behind the Iron Curtain, and the Soviet Union is seeking a new weapon that will give it mastery in the Cold War. What is the secret of the Martian relics? As the legendary warlord Caesar returns to life, the Doctor is faced with some of his oldest and deadliest enemies. The fate of Earth and the future of Ace are now intertwined. So this story would see the glorious return of the Ice Warriors, as well as the Doctor planning to have Ace enroll in the Academy on Gallifrey. Supporting characters would include Marcus Cunningham and Reyna, and the story would be a heist gone wrong involving the Ice Warriors and a man named Felnikov. During the story, an Ice Warrior relic called the Helmet of Caesar would be on Reyna, and she would transform into Caesar, while also giving birth to her and Marcus's daughter, who they name Rain, as well as Ace finding out about the Doctor's dubious discussions about her enrollment and causing some friction between the two. By the end of the story, the Time Lord that the Doctor had been in contact with about Ace tells him that she failed and won't have her join the Academy. The Doctor tells her this, they eventually make up, and she joins him for another adventure. This story would have received positive reception from fans and considered one of the best of the season, and a great reintroduction to the Ice Warriors, despite them being underutilized in the story at points. The second story is Action at a Distance, written by Stephen Wyatt. The year is 1990. In London, safecracker Rain Cunningham breaks into a house and finds more than the family jewels. In the Middle East, the kingdom of Saif-ud-Din is terrorized by Soviet invaders and alien monsters. And on the Scottish border, a highly guarded facility contains an advanced alien weapon. These are all part of the Doctor's master plan, but master plans can go awry. This story would involve the formal introduction of a new companion, Rain Cunningham, who we saw as a baby in the last serial. She is a safecracker/thief with a heart of gold, similar to Lady Christina in our universe. The villain this time around is the samurai-like race, the Metatraxi, who look like giant bugs. They have teamed up with Felnikov from the last serial, who mainly wants to try and get his hands on a certain MacGuffin-type weapon, with the help from the Metatraxi. The story was another example of the Doctor being a master chess player, setting up everything from the very beginning, especially a side twist involving Rain being in leagues with the Russians, when this was set up by the Doctor. The story ends with the Metatraxi leaving Earth, Felnikov getting arrested, the weapon being destroyed, and the Doctor asking Rain to come with him in the TARDIS, much to Ace's chagrin. This story wouldn't have been as well liked as its predecessor, as many thought Rain was too unlikable and annoying, as well as the Metatraxi being okay villains at best, with the comedy involving them being eye-rolling. However, fans would have considered this a good story. The next story is Bad Destination, written by Ben Aronovich. Welcome aboard the space vessel Vancouver. Its mission, to guard a vast shipment of grain from Earth to the planet Cephnethome. Its captain is called Ace. She seems a little unsure of herself. In fact, some might think she was new to the job. Its medical officer is simply the Doctor, and he's perhaps not all he seems. When mysterious ships target the Vancouver, Ace and the Doctor are pushed to the limit. Meanwhile, there's something nasty in the grain containers, and it's not very happy. This episode would have been Rain's first major story, disguised as the Doctor's nurse, as his role as a medical officer. It features the Doctor, Rain, and Ace investigating something aboard their ship, while also once again dealing with the Metatraxi. It's revealed that a distant brethren of the Metatraxi called the Grub are eating all of their grain supply after being banished from their home planet by the Metatraxi. There's also a subplot involving a mutiny on board, since Ace is undercover as a captain and doesn't know what the hell she's doing, so her crew try to rebel. Thanks to their creator, the Grub and Metatraxi are forced to share the planet once again, and the Doctor, Rain, and Ace leave before they are questioned by the crew. The story would have been the least favorite of the season, as many claim that due to the budget at the time, the spaceship sets and models were really bad. The Grub was a terrible villain, and the Metatraxi were a bit better utilized here, but still somewhat forced into the story. The next story is A School for Glory, written by Tony Etchells and Ian Briggs. 1915. The thick of the Great War. The Doctor, Ace, and Rain come across a boarding school where young men are trained for this war, but something is off about this school, and the soldiers are very different, too bound by loyalty and glory. In fact, they might not be human at all. Ace and Rain go undercover in the school, while the Doctor goes to the trenches where he meets two young soldiers who are very similar to the aliens they're fighting. So this would involve the Doctor, Rain, and Ace uncovering a mystery surrounding a training school in England where soldiers are then being sent to Gallipoli. The Doctor is there while Ace and Rain once again go undercover as help to uncover what's going on. The alien menace are called the Gornagans, who are very honor-bound, loyal, and obsessed with glory to their race. Kind of a discount Sontaran in a way. The aliens are never outwardly shown, only implied, and the action only takes place on Earth. They are apparently using this war to help train themselves for any other future war they need to fight, as they are now in peacetime. It would have served as a commentary on the quote-unquote glory of war and patriotism. By the end of the story, the Gornagans are defeated, the humans are returned, and they eventually leave. The story would have been praised, with good social and political commentary in regards to war, as well as the story itself and the mysteriousness of the villains of the episode. However, some felt the plot was stretched thin for only 2 episodes. The final 7th Doctor story would have been Elixion, written by Robin Mukherjee. A monastic planet named Elixion is populated by humans and large beetles. The humans are monks who generate an elixir that comes from the beetles. When the Doctor comes across the planet, he realizes that an abbot wants to feed him to the beetles for the ultimate elixir that would make his mind the most powerful in all the galaxy. But the Doctor won't let that happen, and there might be a test of wills that would mean the ultimate sacrifice. The final story of this season, as well as McCoy's regeneration story, would be about the Doctor and company landing on a somewhat barren world with the exception of a gigantic and elegant monastery, where the Doctor and Ace take a tour while Rain runs off. The Doctor notices that the abbot in charge of the monastery and the monks is acting very strangely towards them, and the Doctor believes he has a sinister plan of some sort. Rain discovers that the rest of the barren human-like population are being fed to the beetles, who somehow generate this elixir that allows the monks in the monastery to become all-powerful. Eventually, it's revealed that the abbot wants the Doctor's intelligence and wants his mind to become the most powerful in all the galaxy. The last episode, for the most part, is a battle of wills through a mind-bending competition, somewhat similar to The Brain of Morbius, except a little bit more creative and unique. The abbot eventually beats him and the Doctor is dying. Rain manages to pull them out of there while Ace blows up the monastery with Nitro 9. They take the Doctor back to the TARDIS where he eventually regenerates, but it is unclear into who. The story would have been considered the best of the season, and many fans considered McCoy's goodbye and regeneration to be one of the best at the time. The abbot was stated to be a great love-to-hate type villain, and the story was high concept but simplistic at the same time, and also praised. So that's it for the 7th Doctor era. Time to enter the 8th Doctor era. Powell ultimately, but begrudgingly, kept his promise that if the ratings improved, which they did, that he would renew Doctor Who for another season. It was then ultimately announced that beloved comedian Rowan Atkinson would take the reins as the Doctor. Reactions to the announcement were rather mixed, with some saying that he was perfect for the Doctor and could offer something new, while some felt he was too famous for the role. According to rumor, Powell wanted someone more famous to act as the Doctor to bring in higher ratings. In terms of the new producer, many experienced and inexperienced producers were considered until Gary Downey was ultimately chosen. Due to his impressive work in the previous 3 seasons, and at the behest of Andrew Cartmel, Ben Aronovich was eventually chosen as script editor. In terms of the tone for this era, Aronovich wanted to continue Cartmel's ideas on having a rather dark Doctor and darker stories, but Downey was heavily against it. Whether it was his own ideas or being influenced by Powell and the BBC, Downey wanted more of a fun kids show aesthetic, similar to the 5th Doctor era, when the show was popular last. It was because of this that they majorly clashed on the tone, and ultimately settled on hard sci-fi with bits of whimsy and darkness here and there. The previous TARDIS console room was kept and stayed for the entirety of the 8th Doctor era. Also, due to higher ratings, the BBC had given the new season an additional 4 episodes for a total of 18 episodes, and a new title sequence would be produced for the new era, with Kef McCulloch doing the theme once again. Rowan Atkinson's 8th Doctor was somewhat different from his predecessor, and while he kept some Machiavellian traits, he was more snarky and sarcastic. As Downey put it, he was the 6th Doctor, but done right, because while he would at times appear cold and authoritative to his villains or anyone who doubted him, he still had a warm demeanor for his companions and anyone he took a liking to. He just had a hard shell that had to be thoroughly broken to get on his good side. With that, let's get into the first 2 years of the 8th Doctor era. In order to properly change up Doctor Who and offer something new, Season 28 actually had an ongoing story arc involving an ancient Gallifreyan being called the Time Worm. However, it was requested that the Doctor have a proper post-regeneration story before the arc started. With this, the first story is The Fainted Wanderer, written by Ben Aronovich. The Doctor is struggling with his regeneration, and a new villain, the Empress of the Rachnos, tries to take advantage of that. A young man named Chris might be his only salvation. In this story, the Doctor lands in modern-day England, right near where Rain lives, and he soon passes out. Both Ace and Rain are unsure of what to do, as both don't know what happened to the Doctor. Ace briefly remembers the Doctor talking about regeneration, where if a Time Lord is mortally wounded, they can regenerate their bodies into a new body. Rain eventually carries the Doctor into her house, while Ace is trying to figure out the TARDIS. A young man named Chris notices the commotion, and it's revealed that he and Rain are old friends. Unbeknownst to all of them, an alien race known as the Rachnos are trying to take over London to rebirth their race after their planet was destroyed. Eventually, the Doctor wakes up, and with the help of Ace, Rain, Chris, and Rain's father Marcus, they eventually stop the Rachnos threat. After all this adventuring, Ace wants to be dropped off in Paravel to maybe live a quiet life, or maybe not, and the Doctor whispers the third rule into Ace's ear, and she smiles. He eventually asks Chris to join him on his adventures, and he says yes, and the TARDIS dematerializes. This story would have been considered mixed to positive from fans, and not one of the best post-regeneration stories, but considered better than Time in the Rani. Many people took a liking to Chris, and liked that Rain and Marcus's relationship after Action at a Distance was properly showcased. Many liked the villain, but felt the effects were poor, even for Doctor Who standards. The next story is Genesis, written by John Peel. Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. In the fertile crescent of land on the banks of the rivers Tigris and Euphrates, mankind is turning from hunter-gatherer into farmer, and from farmer into city-dweller. Gilgamesh, the first hero king, rules the city of Uruk. An equally legendary figure arrives in a police telephone box, the TARDIS, which has brought the Doctor and his companions, Rain and Chris, to witness the first steps of mankind's long progress to the stars. And from somewhere amid those distant points of light, an evil sentience has tumbled. To her followers in the city of Kish, she is known as Ishtar the Goddess. To the Doctor's forebears on ancient Gallifrey, she was a mythical terror. The Time Worm. This serial would pretty much be an adaptation of the novel, except with Rain and Chris instead of just Ace, as well as the more adult themes of the novel being majorly toned down, since this would be translated to television, and the references to the third and fourth Doctors being taken out. This story would have received a mixed reaction from fans, feeling that the Doctor and companion chemistry was lacking and that the Eighth Doctor still felt like a lackluster incarnation. However, they felt some aspects of the story were quite good, albeit felt somewhat rushed, as well as an interesting setting. Some felt the villain was generic and the character of Gilgamesh was one-dimensional. The next story is Exodus, written by Terrence Dicks. The pursuit of the Time Worm leads the Doctor, Rain, and Chris to London 1951, and the Festival of Britain, a celebration of achievements of this small country, this insignificant corner of the glorious thousand-year Reich. Someone, or something, has been interfering with timelines, and in order to investigate, the Doctor travels further back in time to the very dawn of the Nazi evil. In the heart of Germany of the Third Reich, he finds that this little band of thugs and misfits did not take over half the world unaided. History must be restored to its proper course, and in his attempt to repair the timelines, the Doctor faces the most terrible dilemma he has ever known. Similarly, with the first and next two stories, it would adapt the novel, except the darker aspects would be a bit downplayed and wouldn't feature as many adult references. The story received universal acclaim from fans who stated it was one of the best Doctor Who stories in a long, long time. The companions were properly fleshed out, especially with Chris dealing with being in Nazi Germany. The Eighth Doctor managed to finally feel like a complete character. The darker aspects were a welcome addition, and the chemistry between Doctor and companions was much better, as well as having it be a rather interesting take that Dix made a sequel to his first ever story written for Doctor Who, and a welcome reintroduction of the War Chief. The next story is Apocalypse, written by Nigel Robinson. The TARDIS has tracked the Time Worm to the edge of the universe and the end of time, to the lush planet Kirith, a paradise inhabited by a physically perfect race. Rain and Chris are not impressed. Kirith has all the appeal of a wet weekend in Margate, and its inhabitants look like third-rate Aussie soap stars. The Doctor is troubled too. If the Time Worm is here, why can't he find her? Why have the elite Pangistri lied consistently to the Kirithons they govern? And is it possible that the catastrophe that he feels is the result of his own past actions? This serial would again follow the book rather closely, but toning down any darker themes, as well as the inclusion of the second Doctor being nixed. The story received mixed reviews from fans, stating that while not bad, wasn't particularly memorable and was very by the numbers. Many stated that the love story felt shoehorned in, and the overall plot seemed to be very generic and bland. The final story is Revelation, written by Paul Cornell. The parishioners of Cheldon Boniface walked to church on the Sunday before Christmas 1992. Snow is in the air, or is it the threat of something else? The Reverend Trelaw has a premonition too, and discusses it with the spirit that inhabits its church. Perhaps the Doctor is about to visit them again? Some years earlier, in a playground in London, Chad Boyle picks up a half brick. He's going to get that weird Chris boy who says he wants to be an astronaut. The weapon falls, splitting Chris's skull. He dies instantly. The Doctor has pursued the Time Worm from prehistoric Mesopotamia to Nazi Germany, and then to the end of the universe. He has tracked down the creature again. But what trans-temporal trap has the Time Worm prepared for their final confrontation? Once again and finally, the story follows the book rather closely while making the necessary changes. No dark aspects, no references to other Doctors, and current companions replace Ace. The story received very positive reviews from fans and wrapped up everything quite nicely. Many commented on Cornell's writing, who thought he was a great addition to the world of Doctor Who, as the story was very imaginative and original, unlike the last story. Overall, this season would have been considered a hit, despite taking a while to get going. The ratings would have very much increased, which caused the BBC to once again renew it for another season. Atkinson's Doctor managed to hit his stride by the end of the season, and quite a few people seemed to like him as the Doctor. Chris became a fan-favorite companion and was well-liked by many. Despite some mixed stories here and there, many were very excited to see what would come next. For season 29, very little changed except for the number of stories, which went from 5 to 7, and that the season finale would be Rain's final story. The first story is Entity, written by Ben Aronovich. A strange being only known as the Entity threatens the stability of the universe by wiping it from existence entirely. The only thing that stands between it and its goal is the Doctor. While traveling through space, the Doctor and company come across a never-before-seen phenomenon which seems to be the polar opposite of a black hole, a white hole as coined by Chris. The Doctor tries to study it properly, but the white hole seems to be some sort of disguise for something else. It's not really a space-time phenomenon, but something else entirely. Some sort of entity bent on swallowing up the entire universe. When trying to make any sort of connection with the entity, the TARDIS fails and everything goes dark. The TARDIS is stuck in space while the entity seems to be growing. The next episode deals with the Doctor trying to jumpstart the TARDIS while the entity grows and grows. The Doctor theorizes that if they don't stop the entity, it will swallow the entire universe. The Doctor eventually gets the TARDIS up and running and tries to contact Gallifrey. They are then warned of the impending danger, but they seem to not at all be frightened. Then they disappear. The Doctor soon sends the TARDIS into the time vortex while forming a bubble around the TARDIS, keeping them safe. When Rain wonders what happened, the Doctor tells her the universe is gone. The final episode will revolve around the Doctor and company going back in time to the Big Bang, where the Doctor proposes this entity was created. They spot it, a small colorful dot where the Doctor reads it has not gained sentience yet. They go forward a couple billion years where the Doctor starts reading it, and there's a new sign inside of it that the Doctor states that it is probably now alive. The Doctor then goes into the depths of the TARDIS and finds a strange-looking chair with technological attachments, where he starts working on some sort of communication device to talk with the early sentients. Rain urges the Doctor to kill it now, but he refuses, claiming it is its only species, if it is one, to ever exist, so the Doctor doesn't want to destroy it. He starts communicating with it, and it is revealed that throughout its existence, it sees a future where the universe has become too vast and full of itself that it needs to be destroyed. The Doctor tries to stop it from thinking that and makes an argument for the universe. When he realizes that it can't be reasoned with, the Doctor decides to ultimately contain it, and through some spacey-wacy means, does so, and the universe is saved. The Doctor gives it to the Time Lords, and even though he doesn't trust them, they are the only ones who could store it properly. The TARDIS then dematerializes. This story would have received relatively positive reviews from fans, praising its high-concept ideas and how it relatively takes place in one location, as well as Atkinson giving a very good performance. However, some fans felt it went on for a bit too long, and it could have just been 2 episodes. The next story is Avatar, written by David A. McGinty. The TARDIS team lands in Cornwall, and they notice a very strange man named Professor Freeborn at Miskatonic University of England, and the Doctor goes to ask him questions. Meanwhile, Chris and Rain notice that an invasion is starting to happen, and see bodies of the dead suddenly come back to life. This would be a very small invasion-esque story. It wouldn't be a typical story with ships in space over Earth or anything like that. It would be a quiet invasion. The alien race would never get an official name and only be called the Body Snatchers. The head of the Body Snatchers would find a fossilized body of a Silurian god as a cliffhanger of the second episode. The third episode would be the TARDIS crew and Freeborn trying to stop him from cloning the body and using it to truly resurrect himself and take over. It would be heavily influenced by the works of H.P. Lovecraft, and the final episode would feature several ideas present in his work, with a Doctor Who budget, of course. The story would have received positive reviews from fans who would have loved the concept and its execution, as well as the third episode when everything comes into fruition, despite the effects being somewhat lackluster. The next story is Time's Crucible, written by Mark Platt. The TARDIS is invaded by an alien presence and is then destroyed. The Doctor disappears. Rain and Chris, lost and alone, find themselves in a bizarre, deserted city ruled by the tyrannical leech-like monster known as the Process. Lost Voyagers, drawn forward from ancient Gallifrey, perform obsessive rituals in the ruins. The strands of time are tangled in a cat's cradle of dimensions. Only the Doctor can challenge the rule of the Process and restore the stolen future. But the Doctor was destroyed long ago, before time began. Once again, these would be very similar to the book, but with Rain and Chris instead of Ace, as well as being much more condensed. The story would receive mixed reception from fans, as many stated that while the world building involving Gallifrey was very well written, and the twists and turns being integrated rather well, that most of the story was boring and uninteresting. The next story is Warhead, written by Ben Aronovich. Industrial development has accelerated out of all control, spawning dangerous new technologies and laying the planet to waste. While the inner cities collapse in guerrilla warfare, a dark age of superstition dawns. As destruction of the environment reaches the point of no return, multinational corporations and super-rich individuals unite in a last desperate effort, not to save humankind, but to buy themselves immortality in a poisoned world. If Earth is to survive, someone has to stop them. From London to New York to Turkey, Rain and Chris follow the Doctor as he prepares, finally, to strike back. So in this case, the only major change outside of the obvious ones is that Aronovich wrote the story instead of Cartmel, who in this world only wrote a rough outline, since it would have been very unlikely to have him come back for a full story, since he technically never wrote for Doctor Who. This story would have received mixed to positive reception from fans who praised Aronovich's writing. Many felt like it was an action film under the guise of a Doctor Who story with a great setting and an intriguing story. However, some felt that at some points the Doctor didn't match his character and the pacing was rushed. The next story is Witchmark, written by Andrew Hunt. A coach crashes on the M40. All the passengers are killed. The bodies carry no identification. They are wearing similar new clothes, and each has a suitcase full of banknotes. A country vet delivers a foal. The mare has a deep wound in her forehead. In the straw, the vet finds a tapered horn. In the darkening and doomed world known to its inhabitants as Tir Nagnog, the besieged humans defend their walls of their citadel Dinobrin against mythical beasts and demons. The TARDIS's link with the Eye of Harmony is becoming ever more tenuous and is in urgent need of repair, but the time machine takes the Doctor, Rain, and Chris to a village in rural Wales and a gateway to another world. Similar to its other adaptations, it would be similar to the novel with darker elements downplayed, changed characters, and condensed the story. This story would have received mixed reception from fans, stating that while the story started out good and had some good fantasy elements, the rest of it was rather messy, as well as many stating that the Cat's Cradle trilogy didn't end properly and barely felt like an arc. The next story is Velocity, written by Kate Orman. The Doctor, Rain, and Chris go to a domed city on an unnamed planet. The Doctor finds that someone or something recruits people for a cult that promises pleasures for eternity. The TARDIS team find out what's running the planet, the Daleks. But for some reason, the Daleks think that the Doctor is dead, and the renegade Daleks are trying to make new Daleks. Can the Doctor stop the renegades, or are another group of Daleks, the Imperials, going to stop this? For the first episode, this would be a mystery in regards to who the villain actually is, until it's revealed in the cliffhanger that it is in fact the Daleks. Most of the second episode would be explaining how they're back and how they think the Doctor is dead. The final 2 episodes would be the Doctor trying to stop this and the Imperials getting involved. It would pretty much be a majorly tweaked version of Revelation of the Daleks with some added mystery and spice thrown in, as well as some influence from Logan's Run. The story would be, for the most part, well received. However, some felt the Doctor being dead subplot made little sense and was a bit repetitive of Revelation of the Daleks. Some wish this ended the Dalek Civil War rather than drag it out. However, the story and mystery were praised. The final story is Discovery of Witches, written by Paul Cornell. The witch trials in England are headed by a man named Matthew Hopkins. When the Doctor appears and does something out of the ordinary, he, Chris, and Rain are accused of witchcraft. However, the Doctor notices that the fear of witchcraft is even stronger than it normally is. He begins to realize that something truly evil is behind this, or possibly someone. The TARDIS crew lands in the mid-1600s in Essex. Despite doing very little, the townspeople accuse them of witchcraft. They soon try to contact the Witchfinder General. The Doctor tells Chris and Rain to go hide while he tries to bargain with them. But they don't care and appear extremely angry and start hurling rocks at the Doctor. He manages to have them turn on each other and escapes the chaos. Rain and Chris are now looking for the TARDIS, as well as trying to escape the sight of the townspeople. Meanwhile, the Doctor notices something strange about the drinking water. He tastes a bit of it and knows that something is wrong with this town, and that it's in the drinking water. Rain and Chris notice that the TARDIS is gone, and they soon encounter Matthew Hopkins and a cloaked figure who turns out to be the Ronnie, disguised as John Stern. Matthew Hopkins takes them to test to see if they are witches, while Rain and Chris plead that they aren't. The Doctor then comes in to stop him, and he eventually gets taken to test to see if he is a witch as well. The test soon starts, and the Doctor apologizes to his companions, but puts something in Chris's pocket and whispers something into his ear. They throw him into the lake, he submerges, and after a while take him out, and he appears to be dead. Rain goes next, and she starts swimming, so she is to be hanged. Before Chris can go in, he manages to untie himself, throws the device at the Ronnie, and her disguise is lifted, and Chris yells, "Witch!" and runs away. Chris eventually stumbles upon the Doctor, who appeared dead by suppressing his hearts, but is now revived. They try and get back to Rain, but they are too late, and she is hanged. The Ronnie is also on the gallows, and the Doctor has a bit of a back and forth with the Ronnie until she is also hanged. The Doctor and Chris eventually get back to the TARDIS, which the Doctor found before, with Rain's body, and they dematerialize in front of Hopkins, who reaffirms his suspicions. Chris then asks what he will do with Rain, and the Doctor says that he has something figured out. The story would have received very positive reception from fans, mainly for its setting, dark tone, and reintroduction of the Ronnie in a more sinister portrayal. Many also praised the performance of Sean Connery as Matthew Hopkins and felt that Rain and Chris had a lot of great moments together. However, some felt like it was just a reiteration of the story Mark of the Ronnie. So, That's it for seasons 27 to 29. Next, we will do the 30th anniversary season and Rowan Atkinson's final season with season 31. Thank you and goodbye for now.